So you want to make a zine? Well, this is part one of a series of videos where I'm going to show you exactly how, from having just a little idea in your head, all the way to a printed zine. My name is JP Coovert, and I make a new tabletop role-playing game zine every month on my Patreon. I've written, illustrated, designed, published, and distributed over 50 unique zines, and I want to show you how fun and creatively rewarding the process can be. Okay, let me back up a second here. A zine, like magazine, is a booklet that can be any size, but it's usually self-published or has a limited print run. It can be full color or black and white, and the contents can be whatever you want, a collection of photos or illustrations, a comic or a political manifesto. Zines can be a list of jokes or a collection of video game reviews, or they can be like what I make, tabletop role-playing games and adventures. The amazing thing about making zines is being able to spend some time making some art, getting your ideas out of your brain, and then being able to reproduce them cheaply in a real-life, tangible way. You could totally write a blue sky thread or make a drawing for Instagram or film a TikTok or YouTube video to share with people, but there's just something so infinitely rewarding about spending the time to make a physical object that has your heart and soul in it, and then being able to hand the object to someone else. It's my absolute favorite thing to do, and in this video series, I want to help demystify some of the technical hurdles that might be keeping you from making your own zines. It's really not that hard, and I just can't stress enough how truly rewarding and fun it is to take an idea and turn it into something real. Okay, so part one is all about ideas and writing. I'm going to show you my process, how I start generating ideas, make an outline, refine the writing until I have a finished manuscript, a fully written zine. And then in upcoming videos, we'll talk about art and layout and printing, all that stuff. Okay, so I like to start my writing process with just a single idea. For a TTRPG adventure, it could be a single fantastical location like an explosive goblin quarry, or a temple with a portal to the underworld, or a stairway to the moon. Or maybe I just want to make a zine about unusual dragons, or a big collection of small NPCs or big NPCs. Or a single idea could just be making a guide explaining how to draw dungeon maps. I'm not writing full book-length novels here. A zine doesn't have to be a huge multi-layer project. Having just a single idea and exploring it keeps the scope manageable and the project focused. So how the heck do you come up with a good enough single idea to flesh out into an entire zine? Well, you can take inspiration from a piece of artwork, or maybe a line from a movie or a song that can inspire an entire zine. I found a big part of being creative and trying to make cool stuff is to constantly be on the lookout for inspiration. So I love reading other TTRPG books and comics, listening to punk rock and fantasy audiobooks while I draw, watching shows and movies with my wife, and playing video games in my spare time. Ideas can come from way more mundane places too. So I made this little zine called the Windsong Woods, and I got the idea from this one just by driving past a neighborhood near where I live called the Windsong Woods, wrote it down and combined it with my love for the Zelda Lost Woods, and here we go. So it's all about being open to getting inspired from anywhere, and all of that stuff gets jumbled and combined in my brain, and then smashing several ideas and inspirations together to make something new. That's what leads to the fun concepts that I can turn into a full-on zine. So I've always got my phone ready. I like to keep a big list of ideas for zines and YouTube videos, and even quick little journal entries of what's going on in my life. That way I always have something ready when I want to start the next project. Now, once I have an idea I want to flesh out, then I grab a scrap sheet of paper, or more often a Google Doc, and start outlining. Now, I'm definitely not going from an idea straight to a finished manuscript. That's like impossible. Just sitting down to write and you go start to finish. It's just not possible, at least for my brain. So what I like to do is break everything down into small sections, almost like mini chapter titles or things I want to cover in the zine. So I'm not writing out full sentences, just bullet pointed words for each section, in. It's super rough. I jump around all over the place because I can't think in a straight line either. And really it's all just about getting ideas out of my brain onto the page. Then when I have a good plan, I've organized it, got an idea of what the entire zine might consist of, then I can go back and start really outlining and fleshing things out. So at this point, I'm still not writing complete sentences, but I'm adding bullet points, making lists of ideas, and reorganizing sections so everything has a good flow and makes sense. This is really the idea phase. My brain is switched into creative mode where I just try and get my thoughts out and have them be sort of organized. I'm not thinking at all about writing neat and legible sentences yet. That's going to come later. It's all just notes for just me. But one thing I am thinking of while doing all this outlining is how all of these sections and stuff are going to fit into an actual zine. So while the contents of a zine can be whatever you want, there are some limitations to the format. So zines are usually folded sheets of paper that have a staple in the middle. So that means a single sheet of paper is actually 4 pages of a zine. So a zine needs to have a number of pages that can be divided by 4. So every month I'm trying to make like a 12 or 16 page zine. Sometimes it goes up to like 20 or 24 if I need the extra space. And most of my zines are this digest size. So a piece of US letter, 8.5 by 11 inch, folded in half to make like a 5.5 by 8.5 inch page size. And with that in mind, sometimes I like to make a little dummy book by taking a few sheets of paper and folding them in half to mock up the zine. This way I can look at my outline in the Google Doc and then start planning out what my pal Kyle from the MapCrow YouTube channel calls a book map. It's just a rough guide to get an idea of how many pages I think I'll need for the final zine. So let's take a look at the book map that I actually just made for the zine that I'm working on this month. It's my game Starborg that I made with my pal Kyle. It's a new anthology zine called Subspace Datacron, issue number 3. Now obviously my little mock-up here has a cover, an inside cover, page 1, 2, 3, and so on. I can really easily just reference my outline that I have written up already in my Google Docs and fill in some pages where I think each of these bullet points and different sections will go to fill out this dummy booklet. I'm trying to visualize how much space the writing will take up, where I want the illustrations or maps to go, and I can start thinking about if I want to do anything fun with the layout, but more on that later in the series. The purpose of all of this, it's really easy to get carried away just writing in a Google Doc without thinking about how the writing is going to translate to the final zine and layout with illustrations and all of that. It's just a quick and dirty visual tool to help me keep the physical zine in mind while I'm still early on in the writing process. So once I feel like my ideas have been organized on paper and in the Google Doc, then I can really start getting into the writing phase. This is where I'm taking all of my ideas and then trying to communicate them to the reader. And this is really important for TTRPG zines because the reader is usually the person who's using the zine to play with a group, so they need to be able to read the zine, interpret it quickly, and then be able to communicate what's going on back to the players. So for me, the writing process is all about being super clean and super concise. So I take one little section at a time and try and make it as tight, focused, and legible as possible. Sometimes I even go through and write out each sentence in a kind of shorthand, like I think to myself, what am I actually trying to communicate with this sentence? And then just write down a couple of words. So here's a good example from my game Teenage Mutant Tunnel Goons. I might start by writing some of the rules like mutation, you are a Teenage Mutant Tunnel Goon. Bonus to action rolls, kangaroo +1, jump box, armadillo +1, digging armor. I do this so I don't have to worry about proper sentence structure and all that junk while I'm trying to figure out the best way to communicate the ideas from the loose outline to something that makes sense for somebody to read. So once I have my paragraph figured out in shorthand, then I can go back and write out a nice clear sentence. So that last sentence about mutations and armadillos would then turn into, you are a teenage humanoid animal, your mutation gives you bonuses to action rolls, but it's up to you to describe how that works. If you're a kangaroo mutant, you might get a +1 to jumping or boxing. If you're an armadillo mutant, you might get +1 when digging or deflecting an attack with your armored shell. Then I just repeat this process over and over, sentence by sentence, making my way through the outline. Okay, here's another important trick. While I'm writing out these sentences, I like to think about what sort of illustrations I want to have in the zine too. So one of my favorite things to do is skip writing the physical description of a character if I know that there's going to be an illustration of them. That way you can save on some of the writing because the drawing will do the work for you. I guess a lot of times I do add a little line in the Google Doc describing the drawing, even though that writing will never be seen in the printed zine. Just a little note for me to remember what I want to draw. Okay, so I'm hoping at this point you can kind of tell that my writing process is all about iteration. Actually, that's going to be like the main theme of this video series. If you think about making a zine as just one big task, it's just too overwhelming. Even for me, after making over 50 of them, it's just too much to keep straight in your brain. So breaking each part of the process into individual steps and then breaking those steps down further and again makes the whole thing way more manageable. You know, to make a zine, you have to have an idea, you got to write it, you got to illustrate it, do the layout, print it. But I'm not going to stop at just breaking it down there. To write a zine, I do a rough outline, and then I iterate to do a more thorough outline. Then I break it into rough sentences, and then I clean up those sentences so someone else can read and make sense of them. And at the same time, I have these little tricks like the dummy book and writing down the illustrations so I can keep future steps of the zine making process in mind without getting totally overwhelmed. If I had to just sit down and write an entire zine start to finish, there's no way I could do it. But by, breaking down the process, my brain can really focus on making progress one step at a time. Okay, I hope this video was helpful and gets you pumped to try writing your own zines. In the next parts of the series, I'm going to tackle layout, illustration and artwork, and printing. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss those videos. And if you're interested in my TTRPG zines, consider signing up for Patreon or checking out my online shop. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. See ya!